churches are stealing money from the government. Chuck Swindoll stepping down. Mark Driscoll stepping in the way. And Kirk Cameron is just a jerk. This is Church is Lame.
Yay!
Yay, Mark, how you doing?
I'm mostly conscious, which is kind of a trick after, some of the headlines this week.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of them this week. I don't know what was in the water this week, but we've got a lot to get through. So we're going to start off, I'm going to say we're going to go from less celebrity to more celebrity as the show goes on. So if you want to,
I like that.
So if you're looking for the big names, just wait because it's coming. But we're going to start off locally. Mark found a great story that really, in my opinion, needs to be top of mind in the modern church.
Yeah, this is just a weird one to me. It comes from CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network. And it's every church should start a Christian school. School vouchers fuel wave of faith-based schools. I want to punch who is responsible for that headline because that's just an awful headline. But it's like exactly what you think it is. It's Christian people with parents with kids in schools complaining about CRT, which isn't taught in K through 12 schools at all, and complaining about gender stuff, and they don't want their children exposed to that. Right? Nothing new here.
Right.
And like some weird things have been going on in like Florida, particularly to help further establishing more schools so that Christian parents can just kind of maybe get together, and create more. And like with homeschooling, you can have co-ops. It's like they want to create something a little bit more formal than a co-op.
Yeah.
But like they're trying to encourage, and they, it's kind of like, who are they? But it's like there are people that are pushing for churches to start building schools or school programs in their churches.
Yeah.
And like this guy, Pastor Melvin Adams, said the dumbest thing in defense of this.
Okay.
He said, "We're making disciples and we're not doing it just on Sundays, but we're doing it all week long." I can't help but notice that you want to take your children out of public school and then talk about how you're making disciples.
Yeah, that's a really interesting part of this. And let me say here, I know that people watch this show and they definitely peg me as kind of like, you don't need to pay attention to Scott because he's just one of these tree-hugging liberal guys. But I want to make it absolutely clear to anybody who's watching or listening that I believe in choice and free markets as much as anybody. I believe in free market solutions. So if you want to go to public school, send your kid to public school. If you want to send them to private school, send them to private school. If you want to homeschool them, homeschool them. If you want to send them to a church school, send them to a church school. Like, by all means, wherever you think your kid is going to get the best education, by all means do that. But let's not confuse like what we're doing. Like we send our kids to school to get education, and we will then later, if they want to have more of a life in ministry, we can send them to seminary to make them advanced disciples, But that's not why we send our kids to kindergarten. And it just seems to me that this is not so much about raising up the next generation of Christians and Christian leaders as it is making sure that the young people don't leave our cult.
Yeah, and like there's maybe a few different ways that this Pastor Adams might have meant that statement, right? He might have meant we want to build these children up into by discipling to them. I can get that. But ultimately, your children can still go to public schools. Mm-hmm. They themselves can witness to non-believers in their classes, and they can still be taught the values and the lessons of the church, of the faith within the context of their local church. Like these are not mutually exclusive things. Right. Even remotely.
Yeah, can I just bring up one thing in relation to that?
Yeah.
So one of the big complaints that's always leveled is how the government wants to be the nanny state. They want to tell you how to raise your kids and what they should believe and what they shouldn't believe, when that should be the role of the family and the parents more specifically. And now we have Pastor Melvin Adams of Faith Family Community Church telling us that he wants the church to be the nanny church. And now he wants spiritual formation to be taken out of the home and away from the parents. And like, who knows what you're going to teach my kid in 8 hours of schooling? I know, because I was part of a church that had a school built into it. And I would never want my kids to learn what that school was teaching them about God and faith.
Yeah. And, we've talked before about, low grade celebrity Kirk Cameron. He was pretty relevant in 1985.
You can't say Kirk Cameron when I've got a drink up to my mouth, because I almost spit it all over the camera, dude. Okay? You can't do that. And Pepsi, if you'd like to sponsor us, just saying.
Yeah. And, generic LaCroix, I'm all about you.
There we go. Okay. Anyway, go for it.
So, because he has this whole thing about we need to be homeschooling our kids. And we understand the nature. It's not that children aren't being taught math correctly, or they're not being taught, English grammar correctly. That's not the problem. They don't want to homeschool, children because they can give those children a better education. I mean,
exactly.
It really depends on a lot of different factors, whether they can even, whether their education is going to be better, the same, or worse. But it's all about sheltering your children from competing ideas. Mm-hmm. And if you cannot counteract, the ideas you don't want them to learn from the world, and of course, you and I are going to disagree with, Kirk Cameron probably quite a lot in what those values should be.
No doubt.
But you're saying to me that you don't have the strength or the power or the resources to actually teach your children that, because your faith and the depth of your understanding of it are insufficient for the job unless you have them, 24/7.
Yeah.
I feel like it's an admission of failure.
Absolutely.
And, in this case, it's like a double or triple failure, right? Because, if anybody's I'm sure you're familiar with, the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Sure.
Yeah. They do a lot of things that just annoy me, and I agree with a lot of things that they do. It's just a weird thing I have with them.
Yeah.
But this Rachel Laser, who's the president of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, she said, the problem isn't churches starting schools, okay? The problem is taxpayer funding for these schools or any private schools. And this, of course, regards, when there's a religious education attached to it, right? Because separation of church and state, it's a big no-no, right?
Right. But before, let's unpack that a little bit. Just to be clear, so churches, if you don't know, they sign into a legal agreement with the government for their tax-exempt status. And basically the agreement goes like this. You're going to not charge us tax for anything, including payroll and salary and those kind of things. And in return, we are not going to get involved with the endorsement of political ideologies. Right? And
yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make sure people understand, when we talk about church and state, there's a lot of things going on when we're talking about funding, but that's the basic premise of that separation.
Yeah. And, that, I get her point of view. It's you, if a taxpayer, your taxes go to various places. I mean, it's kind of like electricity you get from, your electricity provider. You can't control where the electrons come from.
Right.
They just come down that wire.
Right.
You can choose to pay, NRG or, Navient or whoever else. I don't think Navient's even one, but whoever else, right?
Right.
And that's the same thing with our taxes. Our money goes to the government and our taxes go to a thing. Well, I want my taxes to go to the public schools,
right,
that are around my house. I don't want my taxes going to take care of some little isolated, really hyper withdrawn Christian family to teach their kid wacky stuff like humans rode dinosaurs.
And it doesn't even need to go that far, right? Public is public and private is private. The distinction seems to be clear that if you want to do things privately, by all means, do things privately. You have our blessing to take your ball and walk off the court, right? But then you don't get the benefits of being part of a community. In this particular example, the funding of the public school system. If you want to run your school your way and not adhere to public school standards, more power to you. But then you don't get all the support that the public school gets benefits from, which I don't know that they get a ton of benefits, but they get some, mostly in terms of funding and discounts, And it drives me crazy because it's not just about these private schools are getting funds from the government. It's that these private schools that are church schools are bankrupting the government, and that seems to be the point. It's like, well, we're going to set up a school not because we can do better education, but because we can get voucher money, right, from the government, and we can give your kids an education at a discount. And so none of this seems to be about the betterment of the kids. Most of this seems to be about using the government's own money against them in a way. Like there's some sort of like, in this sort of like weird quasi-righteous warfare that is really, really destructive to the child instead of actually being beneficial.
Yeah. And like the worst part of it, or I can't say the worst part, there's so many parts of it are bad.
Yeah.
Like, when we're talking about, where is the money going to, like we have charter schools, we have voucher programs, and charter schools are rife with problems and abuses, and all sorts of things like, like hiring teachers that are underqualified for the job or even completely unqualified because there's no regulation of charter schools.
Yeah.
And private schools are that way. Right. There's lots of private schools out there that have high levels of integrity with their hiring practices. I don't think that, like, Joe Bob's small congregation, I don't know why I said Joe Bob. I feel like that's just, racist against white people.
Right.
But like a rural, church, right? Like it might not be a bad idea to have like a homeschool co-op at the church instead of having to drive halfway across the county to take your kid to a school. So like, hey, cool idea. But in like a suburban or urban area, like where you and I are, have lived our lives or a lot of our lives. It's like these voucher programs aren't good. Like there's a story that came out recently, concerning a bunch of problems with the voucher systems, especially that they have, like the voucher programs have not demonstrated positive results. They have demonstrated negative results in terms of quality of education.
Yeah, hey, let's not get too far out in the weeds about voucher programs in particular. Let's kind of keep this in the realm that we like to fly in, which is churches doing stupid things, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, we've been at this for like almost 15 minutes. So let's land this plane, and I'll give you the final word. But let me just say this: the church is meant to solve the problems of the world, to solve the suffering of the world, and certainly, if you want to extend that to education, that's fine, I guess. I don't have any big problem with churches being committed to education. I do have a problem with this kind of Seven Mountains dominionism that like any justification is a good justification to go to war with any non-Christian entity, in this case, the government. Yeah. And so if that's your thing, like let's start a school to stick it to the man, that's not a good enough reason, and you should stop. Mark, I'm going to give you the last word, and then let's close this up.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're bringing it around to where I was hoping to get to it, is that, when we are, trying to be faithful, and we're trying to, as it says, in the Old Testament, work toward the good of the city, right? And we are to love our neighbor, we are to love our enemies, even. Like a big part of that is going to be like helping the public education system succeed.
Yeah.
And any steps that we support that will, be to its detriment are not good. And we should be focusing our acts of love on making public education better, and then taking the responsibility to give our children the religious education that we think is so important.
That'll preach. Okay. All right. I think that was super important. Like I said, I think that was the thing that we need to talk about, because real life happens locally, right? We talk about all these big stories, national, international stories, but the most important decisions are always local, right? So I'm glad we spent the most amount of time on that. But now we are going to get to the speed round, because we have a lot to talk about, and we're not going to camp on any one for too long. But I definitely did not want the week to go by without mentioning these. Okay. Oh wow, I've got the camera on you the whole time I just said that. Okay. So let's start with Chuck Swindoll. Chuck Swindoll in the Christian community is, like, famous is not even the word. He is a Christian institution unto himself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
TV, radio, print, you name it. You name the media, and he has been dominant in it for decades. He's announced his retirement. But he's not retiring entirely. It's a semi-retirement. He is retiring from active preaching, and has stated that he is going to spend 100% of his professional time on the media ministry side of the house. And I just thought that was interesting, because it's like, dude, where your bread is buttered, isn't it? So, like, instead of like taking charge, and not taking charge, but instead of prioritizing your local flock that you've been put that you've given charge over to disciple them and to lead them and to guide them through their lives, you've instead chose the faceless, nameless masses who just keep pouring money into your coffers, because A, it yields a lot, and B, it's easy. I respect the fact that you're old and you don't have time and energy to do everything. I do. I just wish you would have, like Jesus says to Mary and Martha, I just wish you would have recognized the more important thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I just think I know that some people would hear that and be like, well, you're just being a cynical jerk. And it's like, well, yes, but it's not without its point, because when you look at, how much money does somebody make from preaching compared to like a Christian television station?
Right.
It doesn't look good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that his name, it sounds like Swindoll.
Yeah, that doesn't help. Nice alliteration there. I like it. Okay, let's keep moving along. Okay. Where are we at here? Religion news. Oh, this story alone probably could have been an episode on itself, but I didn't really want to spend that much time on it. But it is election season, and Christians go particularly crazy in election season. And it's interesting that the job of candidates is to earn your vote, right? That's their job right now during this season. And
sounds reasonable.
And so Donald Trump goes and gives some stump speeches in front of some Jewish communities. And instead of giving his speech or doing what Bill Clinton did, which Bill Clinton was a genius at, just kind of like, oh, I'm standing in a Jewish community. Let me speak to how I'm going to have policies, and I'm going to have advisors who are particularly interested in Jewish affairs. Bill Clinton was a master at that, right? Mm-hmm. Instead, Donald Trump gets up to the mic and starts talking about, if I don't win the election, it's because the Jews didn't vote for me, and it'll be very, very bad for you. It's like, what is going on here? It was to me, it was just as like smoke coming out of my ears as they're eating the dogs and cats. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's such a self-centered thing to say in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's just like the fact that he lacks the self-awareness to go, well, hey, that sounded, a bit, Sieg Heilish, is troubling for somebody who tries to say that he's a Christian.
Yeah, and then the other part of this is just like the historical obliviousness, right? Like who was that other guy in history who tried to say that the Jews were the source of all your problems?
Machiavelli.
Yeah, so it's like, oh man. Like I get it. I've been trying to understand, like in this last week, I've been really trying to wrap my head around why, like the message that I keep, like, I believe Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, and that's just not getting through. It's just not getting absorbed. It's just not meaningful. And I've really been trying to understand that. And it seems like we understand tribalism. Like I'm a Republican or Democrat. I've always been a Republican. I've always been a Democrat. But there's this other layer of it that to Americans, democracy it's like breathing. You don't even think about it. Like we've had it for so long and we're so comfortable with it that it just is. It's like air, it's like sunlight. It just is. And so when you say like Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, it has no meaning because you can't conceive of reality without a sun, without air. You just can't conceptualize it. And so, I'm just beside myself at this point for what else does this man have to say for people to understand that he's just a raging lunatic.
Yeah, and at the rate with which evangelicals, especially white evangelicals, like to support the guy, it bothersome to say the least. I feel like if evangelicals want to prove that they're actually Christian, they should just not vote for anybody ever again, because it's just a clown show all around. And voting for the least clown of the clowns is just, to me, it's too frustrating.
Yeah. Or if you really believe that you have to vote Christian, like write in Franklin Graham, if that's what you want to write in. I would never.
No, not Franklin Graham.
I know, but I'm just saying, at least vote in somebody who like is remotely Christian adjacent,
Yeah, Christian adjacent.
That's all I'm saying. Okay, moving on.
Yeah.
The SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, our friends, we love them dearly. Even if they can't find a place in their hearts for the LGBTQ and leadership, they made an interesting announcement this week that they're going to be selling off their headquarters in Nashville, I guess in order to help offset the cost of legal fees. And I'm not sure if I really feel bad about that. What do you think?
I'm probably more bothered by like the idea that Amazon will buy it and turn it into another warehouse where employees are treated like trash.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any love or hate for the SBC. Like I kind of want to say, you know what? I think it's a good thing because I think it's going to force the SBC to really sit down and reevaluate its priorities, not just in terms of, financial decisions, but its priorities in terms of we can't ever let something like this happen again because like the SBC has been it's been shrinking for years now. It's no longer at its peak. And I think it'll help them to come to terms with that and help them to really kind of think about how to realign ministry for the future. So,
oh, my friend, I can't tell you how wrong you are right now. so let me predict.
I said hope a lot.
Okay, let me predict the future for you here. They're going to sell the office, and they're going to kind of go, "Hey, remote work, we can do it." And if you think that there's lack of progress in the SBC now, you just wait to see how leadership just comes to a plundering halt.
Microsoft Teams will do that to you.
Right. Okay, moving on. Last story with celebrity Christians. My favorites, celebrity Christian, Mark Driscoll.
Mark Driscoll.
He's like the man's man of Christianity. The bro guy who's become kind of very popular in modern social media and Christian circles. Flannel shirts and muscled up and ripped jeans. So that it's kind of like I'm about to go split some wood look, but then when he gets at the pulpit, he tells you everything and everybody that is making the world bad and that you shouldn't like. That's Mark Driscoll. And so now he's decided to give a big FU to his community, like literally his community. He put a sign out in front of the church that, what does this say? It's like Jesus 2024, and it looks very much like a political sign. It looks very like political endorsement sign, and the community's asked him to take it down because, once again, the price you pay for being a nonprofit is you don't get to take sides in politics, right? And by putting up that Jesus 2024, you might as well just say, if you vote for liberals, you are demonic. And that's literally the words Mark Driscoll would use. He would use the word demonic to describe anybody who doesn't think the way he thinks.
Yeah, and on the one side of it is I appreciate the vote Jesus sign, right? It's like, no, I get it. Unfortunately, the people most likely to say that are also most likely to be very, very staunchly attached to one particular political party. And so I do see it. Yeah, it's a de facto endorsement of, a political party or position. And it's just a bad idea. But then if the community's like, dude, ditch it. What was his response?
That's a good question. I don't know. What was his response? Oh, and I probably just messed something up here. Hold on. Let me see if I can't get to... We will not comply, but we will multiply.
Yeah. We's babies, kids.
Yeah.
I know it's a very current reference for anybody listening to this.
All that to say, first of all, when the guy who's doing secret exorcisms in the basement of his church to make you submit to his authority is the guy who wants to lead a new church, don't go to that church. And then certainly don't follow this guy down to the political domain. How this guy is still in business after all that exorcism scandal stuff, it's the same kind of brain hurt that goes along with the Donald Trump thing. I just don't understand how we've gone from being people who care about righteousness, who care about humility, who care about the difference between right and wrong, who care about caring for the least of these, how we've transformed into the people of facts don't care about your feelings kind of things,
Yeah, when Jesus says to the disciples around him and other onlookers, he's like, look, whoever wants to enter the kingdom of heaven must come, and must enter it like one of these children. And Mark Driscoll, of course, has never read the Bible, so he doesn't know this.
Yeah.
But I think what I can say definitively is that, if you provoke people by being an a-hole and then they yell at you about it, you're not the victim. And that's his whole MO here, is to play the victim.
Yeah.
And that's your position of strength in the Holy Spirit, is to play the victim.
Yeah.
You're a jerk.
Right. So he's basically playing from the Trump handbook. I'm the strong man and I'm the victim at the same time. I'm always the strong man and I'm always the victim. Okay, done with that. Final things as we land this plane. Persecution Watch. It's back because there were two stories that really grabbed my attention this week.
Oh no.
So there's a person who's convicted in Pakistan for insulting Muhammad. mandatory death sentence. So that's real and that's happening.
That's a thing, man.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And then 162 estimated million 162 millions estimated Christians forced from their homes in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's a real thing. And those are real people.
My.
So all that just to say, all you people in America who say that the church in America is persecuted, stop. Kirk Cameron, stop. Like, nobody is taking away your right to raise your family and educate them and teach them the ways of the Lord. You can do that as much as you want. You can do that with your neighbors as much as you want. Nobody is persecuting you. And every time you use that phraseology, you make the suffering of the world a little more meaningless. Please stop.
Yeah, like I would just invite any of these people in the United States who are claiming that, like, I'm being persecuted for being a Christian. It's like, no, just like go and read about the Apostle Paul. Go read the book of Acts. And then after the end of that, ask yourself, what would Paul say to you about your situation?
Yeah.
I think you'll get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I think that's a good way to land the plane. This is Church is Lame. If you're not familiar with our show, Mark and I are not here just to browbeat the church. What we're here to do is bring up the latest stories in the headline to answer a specific question to church leadership. And that is, why are people leaving the church and why does the church have less relevance today than it used to have? We compile these stories so that when these questions are asked, we can go, here you go. It's not just because people are less spiritual. It's not just because people are so into their phones that they've forgotten about Jesus. It's not just because people have busier lives. Like, there are real, legitimate reasons that people find the modern church laughable, and we're here to document that. Now, we do that in our own cynical, sarcastic way, but this is what we're doing. So if you have anything you want to say, you want to add to the conversation, by all means, go to the socials, the thumbs up, the thumbs down, the like, the reply, the comment, the review, the rating, whatever it is that you like to do, please do it. And if you really want to browbeat us in long form, by all means, shoot us an email at churcheslamepodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, go in peace and serve the Lord. Amen.